Good morning, everybody. The webinar will begin in about 5 minutes. While waiting, I do encourage you to download the handout that's available in the Handouts tab on your control panel. It summarizes today's presentation, and I encourage you to take notes during the presentation. While we wait for the webinar to begin, we do have Bob Jewell with us. Good morning, Bob.
Morning.
A quick question for you. With so much talk about inflation and supply chain issues, what trends are you seeing as far as how companies are managing projects?
A lot more cautiously, that's for sure. You know, just speaking supply chain for a minute, you get so used to lead times for different services and different materials, and your mind gets in that mindset of, everything's always available because that's the world we used to live in. And that factors into durations that you put into the projects. And now what we're seeing is anything that involves material or vendors, you cannot obviously make the same assumptions about lead times and cost and things like that. Obviously in one sentence, it's slowing down projects and raising cost. That's the impact. But it's also creating a little bit of havoc with project teams that are used to, quicker lead times and no problems with availability, and now finding out, if you want to remodel your kitchen, it's taken 6 months to even get cabinets, right? And the price is probably doubled. So, bottom line is costs are going up, and lead times are going out, and your expectations around schedules, which obviously we're going to talk about today, are almost completely blown up. And you got to start getting very, very wise about making sure you're running the project as efficiently as you can, so that you're not throwing additional cost into the project because of inefficiencies.
Right.
Yeah. Turmoil would be probably the single best answer to that question.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right. And what I'm hearing and seeing and telling my clients is it's going to create a new normal. We won't go back to the old normal. There will be a new normal. It always happens in inflation. Companies see an opportunity to raise prices, and they usually won't drop prices back down to where they were. They'll drop them down eventually, but not back, because they'll set a new norm with that. And I think lead times will probably be the thing that maybe gets back to norm someday, but I don't think prices will. I think they'll set a new standard with pricing, and projects that are similar to projects you've done in the past are going to be more expensive, at least from an external cost standpoint. So again, a lot more emphasis on making sure you're being very, very wise with the money you're spending.
Yeah, and talking with some of our clients, some of the challenges they're having is not just supply chain issues and getting the materials, but couple that with the fact that they're not getting workers either. Yeah. So
no, that's the third trifecta here is, what else could affect lead times? Availability of resources. Right. Of course, the funny thing about that is we tend to ignore that even when we have people. We tend to ignore their availability. But obviously, the current state of situation is you can't ignore that, because if they're not physically there, you can't assign them to the project.
Yeah, exactly.
It used to be they're physically there, and we just assume they work a 60-hour week. But we can't even pull that off anymore, or make that obviously unreasonable expectation, because they're physically not there.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm sure some of our audience is laughing at that already, because
yeah.
I mean, I don't remember in my past. I don't remember. I'd get assigned to a project. I don't remember anybody coming up to me and saying, "How long will it take?" They usually just told me how long I've got to do it.
Right.
Which is really, ignoring resources, but at least I was physically there.
Right. All All right, well, we are right at 11 o'clock.
Great.
So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Never Build a Project Schedule Backward. My name is Patrick Allen. I'm the program manager for Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development's public open enrollment programs. Our center specializes in providing employee development for partnering organizations in Northeast Ohio and around the world. We offer training as both public open enrollment programs, currently being delivered both live and virtually via Zoom, and also in person in Independence, Ohio. We can also customize any program and deliver it to you live and virtual or in person at the location of your choice. I am joined today by Kent State facilitator Bob Jewell. I will be serving as your host, and Bob will be our presenter for today. Bob has 40 years of hands-on experience managing and consulting projects, during which many decisions he has made have affected the success and efficiency of the projects. His practical experience proves to be a great source of material for the classroom and has allowed him to develop and fine-tune an excellent process for helping others learn the valuable skills of project management and decision-making. His work has earned him the trust of clients such as Toyota, General Electric, Federal Express, Sherwin-Williams Company, and Cincinnati Children's Hospital, along with many other organizations. He earned a bachelor's degree in engineering from The Ohio State University and is a certified project management professional through the Project Management Institute. He is also the author of Pursuing Project Excellence, 6 Ideas to Improve Your Projects, which was published in 2016. And Bob has been facilitating programs for Kent State since 2002. Everyone in attendance today has been muted to avoid background noise from any of the nearly 100 registered participants. We do encourage you to ask questions at any point during the hour. You can submit your questions to me in writing using the questions tab on the control panel on the right side of your screen, and I will present your questions to Bob as time permits throughout the hour. Again, there is a handout available that summarizes today's presentation. It's located under the Handouts tab on the control panel. We encourage you to download it and take notes during today's presentation. We are recording today's webinar, and you will receive an email with a link to the recording after we conclude our time together. And now I'd like to introduce Bob Jewell.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'll just add that we also have 7 states represented: Ohio, Alabama, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Missouri. And if I've missed somebody, I apologize, but that's always what's impressive about going online is we can grab people from all over the country. I also, real quick, just want to shout out, I think one of my friends is online, Daniel Simon from Cleveland Clinic. So Daniel, if you're online, I saw your name on the registration. Thanks a lot for joining us. So Patrick, I think we're going to open up with a poll question, aren't we?
Yes.
So what's your experience level with project management? We're going to give you 3 options: no experience, some experience, lots of experience. I also thought about a 4th answer, which is lots of experience, but all bad, but I left that one out.
I'll go ahead and launch that right now.
Yeah, Patrick's going to launch it and let us know what your level of experience is, and I'll kind of tailor some of the things I'm going to say today based on just what that level of experience is.
Okay, just a few more seconds because it looks like just about everybody has voted. So I'll just give it about 5 more seconds. Okay, so it looks like at 47% some experience,
Okay.
42% at 42% lots of experience, and 11% no experience.
That's pretty good diversity. Well, thanks for doing that. We'll throw a couple more poll questions your way. Just wanted to start off by defining what a project is, and let you know that this is a definition that comes from the PMBOK guide, which is a document published by the Project Management Institute, better known as the Project Management Body of Knowledge. Most of the definitions I throw at you today, that's where they come from. Project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. And clearly, what separates projects from our day-to-day work is projects tend to be temporary. They're not typically routine. So when we get into something that has a temporary nature to it and seems to be unique or different than our day-to-day work, most likely you can put the project label on top of it. Obviously, with everything going on in the world today, projects are playing a very critical part. People are using project management and projects to implement change, which almost everybody's having to deal with these days because of the economy and world situations. Implementing strategic initiatives. I was never a big fan of this word, but during the pandemic, everybody was having to pivot, and almost every one of those pivots was a project. And companies that did a great job of managing projects ended up doing a great job of doing the pivots that everybody had to do during the pandemic, and I think are still going on as a result of economic situations. Any upgrade of infrastructure, that could be facilities, systems, software, whatever you're doing, almost all of that is project work. Certainly, whenever you sit down and try to improve the quality of existing products or services, that improvement effort, be it a Six Sigma or process improvement or lean manufacturing, whatever, all that is project work. Certainly sitting down and develop new products, new services is also project work. And why do projects need to be managed? Obviously, to ensure that quality outcomes are achieved. We do have customers at the end of projects. Ensure that key stakeholders are satisfied. Improve the work-life balance of employees, which right now in our economy is critical, as companies are finding out. The millennials, when they came into the workplace, were definitely going to bring work-life balance principles with them, and the pandemic gave them a green light to go full speed ahead with that. Obviously, working from home and having a more flexible workday. To ensure resources, time, money, people, equipment are used efficiently and effectively. And again, as more and more companies are looking at bottom lines, they're looking at making sure that those resources are used their most effective, and project management certainly gives us the tools to do that. The other thing I wanted to introduce real quick is the 4 phases of the project life cycle. You initiate a project, you plan it, you go out and execute it, and obviously during execution, you have to monitor and control the project, make sure it's staying on schedule and staying on budget and producing the products that we promised the customer all the way back in the initiation phase. And then when the project is completed, we should be disciplined enough to take the time to close out the project, go back, look on it, how well did it go, what went well, what didn't go well. If we ever did a project like this again, how would we do it better, or what did we do really well in this project that we want to make sure gets captured in a future project. One of my favorite Dilbert cartoons is a cartoon where Dilbert has gone to a project management training program, comes back. The pointy hair guy manager asked, what are the 4 phases that you learned in the program, or what are the phases? I'm sorry, what are the phases of a project that you learned in the program? And Dilbert's answer is enthusiasm, disillusionment, panic, and search for the guilty are the 4 phases. And then the pointy hair, his manager throws in, well, they didn't mention the 5th phase. And Dilbert says, what's the 5th phase? And of course, the 5th phase is the praise and honors for all the non-contributors. It's always one of my favorite Dilberts. Dilbert did a lot of cartoons on project management because they create a lot of good humor. So one of the things I want to do in the short session that we have today is share with you some tools. Probably one of the biggest things I've learned over the years is you're not going to be able to manage a project very well if you don't have the right tools in your toolbox. And the tools that go in the project management toolbox are often very unique from the tools that we use in our day-to-day work. So for instance, a number of the things I'm going to show you today, I don't think you'd ever use them in your day-to-day operational world, but when you come into a project, they're tools that are absolutely necessary if you're going to manage the project well. So one of those tools or concepts that I wanted to share with you right at the beginning, and this is one that you don't typically find in a lot of project management books. It's not even in the Project Management Institute PMBOK book that I mentioned earlier. At least it isn't anymore. It was in the early editions. is what I like to call the triple constraints of a project. The three constraints that you're going to be under when you do a project. One is time. Projects have due dates, and that due date represents a constraint, or you have a client or a customer that wants that project done by a certain date. Some of you have to deal with compliance issues, and you know, where a government entity has established a compliance date. The second constraint, as you can imagine, is money. And that's not profit or revenue, that's your cost to do the project. And unless you happen to be in one of those great companies that has money growing on trees these days, most people are going to have a limit on what you can spend in the project. And then the third constraint, there's actually been a lot of words used for this third constraint, but I prefer quality, and even more specifically, the word requirement. So if I'm producing something for you, we're going to have agreed upon requirements. Obviously, I need to meet those requirements, so that becomes a constraint in the project. By the way, I always like to give credit to where this idea came from. It was originally developed in 1969 by a fellow named Dr. Martin Barnes. He called it the iron triangle. He actually started off using quality and changed it later to performance. Again, I'm more of a fan of requirements because the requirements do represent a constraint. I must meet the agreed upon requirements in the project. I must do that under the constraint of a due date, and obviously under the constraint of a budget. So Patrick, I think we're going to throw another poll question at him. Just curious how many of you are currently involved in a project, or more than one. I think answers we're going to give you is yes, just one, yes, more than one, or you're one of these lucky people that's not involved in a project right now. By the way, if we were physically in a room together, you'd never want to answer the word no, because everybody else in the room is going to write your name down and find some projects for you.
Okay, yeah, just a few more seconds. Looks like almost everybody's voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close it.
Well, just tell me if anybody answered no.
Well, at 77% is yes, more than one. Okay. 14% yes, just one, and 9%.
All right.
Say no.
Well, I want to be in that 9% where you guys don't have to, and it's probably just a lull. There's one coming, probably on Monday. So as we get into the topic, I just wanted to talk for a minute about, you know, probably more and more in the last couple of years, I've seen this, the conflict that occurs between the needs of the business versus the realities of the project. And of course, that conflict is always centered around expectations. You know, we have expectations for how much this project's going to cost, and we have expectations for, you know, how long this project's going to take. And as Patrick asked me this morning before we got started, obviously the current state of supply chains and employee availability and whatever all this reset is that we're going through in the world, in our nation economy, has definitely tossed and turned a lot of the expectations that people have about projects. And I think one of the biggest areas that I find this conflict is the area we're going to talk about today, which is schedules, right? So let's talk about, in a more general way, building schedules. This is something that we do in the planning phase of the project. Obviously, in the initiation phase of the project, we're just trying to wrap our arms around the goal. Why are we doing the project? The deliverables, what are we expected to deliver, and achieve and get agreed upon requirements around those deliverables. Put our team together, get that all squared away, and then generally we'll write that all down in either a project chart or a statement of work or some type of a document that comes out of the initiation phase, gets reviewed, gets approved, and when that's signed off, then we're going to sit down and, you know, probably many things go on during planning, but probably one of the biggest things is to get a schedule together. So here's how I typically have seen people build schedules. Most likely the project already has a proposed finish date. It could be that it's a company that signed a contract with a customer, and that contract has a finish date. Again, it could be a compliance issue where you know, a new law has come out and you've got to comply to that law by a certain date. So generally there's what I call a proposed finish date. And we build the schedule backward from that finish date. And what we discover is that we should have started the project 4 months ago, which unless you have some magic that I'm not aware of or a time machine in your basement that I'm not familiar with, we obviously know we can't go back and start a project prior to the date we're sitting here trying to build a schedule. So what we do instead is we force fit the schedule. Again, we still come off that proposed finish date, but we know that the realistic start date of the project is most likely somewhere in front of us. So we end up doing what we call force fit the schedule. And the end result of that, about 99% of the time, is a bad schedule. Because we are not realistic with sequences, we're not realistic with durations, we're not realistic with resource availability, some things we're going to talk about as we go through the day. So I've always built my schedules this way because I believe that the only realistic date in a project is the date you can actually start it. And the way projects work, all the work flows from that date based on sequences and durations and things like that. So I believe the better way to build a schedule is to build it forward from the realistic start date. And of course, as you can see here, that's taken us past the date somebody wanted to have the project done. But it definitely represents the realistic finish date. So of course, when I present that realistic finish date to the customer or to a key stakeholder, and they say, no, we actually need you to get this project done by the proposed finish date. Obviously, first I'm going to ask if that proposed finish date can move forward. Generally, the answer is no, but I'm still going to ask. So if the answer to that is no, well, then I have no other option other than to do what I call compress the schedule. And any of you that with your experience in project management know that there's going to be ramifications to compressing a schedule. One of the reasons I introduced the triple constraints with you this morning is the triple constraints really plays on the fact that if you compress the schedule, you're going to have an impact. Obviously, here we're playing with time, right? If we have to compress, then we're going to have an impact on the other two sides. Most likely, the cost is going to go up. In fact, it's not even a most likely, it's almost a certainty that the price is going to go up, and, or the cost to do the project, I should say, and we may even have to compromise or renegotiate quality requirements because we may not be able to meet those given an unreasonable due date. So from my experience, I've always built schedules forward. If people don't like the date that schedule shows, then we'll have to compress the schedule. And there are legitimate project management methodologies and techniques to compress schedules, but there are ramifications to compressing schedules. The problem with force fitting a schedule, nobody ever sees overtly the ramifications until the project's underway, or it's 2 weeks before the delivery date. It's pretty obvious that we're not going to hit the delivery date. Where when you build schedules forward, at the very beginning of planning, you can see the ramifications that you're going to have to compress. You can build your schedules more accurately, build your budgets more accurately, and hopefully deal with resource availability and resource commitments on the project in a more realistic manner. When I wrote the book that Patrick mentioned, one of the chapters in the book is the title of our program this morning, Never Build a Schedule Backward. And first of all, I had to get used to saying backward instead of backwards because my book editor said that the proper word is backward. I thought it would be one of the chapters that I got probably the most pushback on, but ironically, over the 7 years that the book's been out, actually the feedback on that chapter has been very positive, and it's been comments like, it's about time somebody said this, or about time somebody wrote about this. You know, but then the next question is, show me how to do it. And that's kind of what I'm going to walk you through this morning. So Patrick, I think we have one more poll question for the audience, and that is, have you ever had a project with an unreasonable due date expectation? And I think I put yes all the time, or no. And again, I want to meet the person that says no to this one.
We are getting some that are saying no.
I like it. Those are probably the people that don't have any projects to do right now.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, just a few more seconds. Okay, 60% say yes.
Okay.
35% say 35% say yes all the time, and 5% say no.
Well, we now know the 35% are probably in healthcare. Daniel's probably laughing at that one. All right, so let's talk about planning a little bit. One of the big things that goes on in planning in a project is you've got to get your arms around activities. So I'm going to use a picnic example in the program this morning, just to kind of keep it light and one that hopefully everybody can relate to. So let's first define what an activity is. It's just a distinct scheduled portion of work performed during the course of a project to create a deliverable to the agreed upon requirements. So in the initiation phase of the project is where we identified deliverables, came upon agreed upon requirements with the customer, and hopefully you have that all agreed to at this point. So I shouldn't have a big concern about the deliverable and agreed upon requirements. I do want to mention something really quick. There are a lot of projects out there these days where it is difficult to wrap your arms completely around the deliverable up front. It could be a high technology, maybe a software deliverable, a brand new product innovation. So I don't want you to think that I'm making the assumption that you can cross every T and dot every I on a deliverable up front, because there are a lot of projects where we just can't do that because of the nature of the deliverable. We can't fully wrap our arms around it. So obviously in that case, we definitely want to slow down. We can start to use some techniques such as agile project management, brings in some techniques that are very helpful there. I'm not going to go down the agile path with you guys today, but I just wanted to alert you that I don't want you to think that I'm assuming that you can perfectly wrap your arms around every deliverable at the beginning of a project. If that's the case, then you just have to slow down. But we still have to identify the activities for the description that we do have. So if we even have a partial description, we should be able to come up with a list of the activities that are needed to get that partial part of the deliverable created, so that we can put it in front of the customer and let them start to see what we're creating, so that we can obviously go on to further define the definition and requirements of the deliverable. The tool that we use in project management to document those activities is what I believe is the most important tool in project management, which is the work breakdown structure, which is defined as a hierarchical decomposition of the activities to be carried out by the project team to create the required deliverables and accomplish the project's goal and objectives. Now, this is not PMI's definition. I've modified it a little bit. PMI would call activities total scope of work. And with the time that we had this morning, I didn't want to get into a big discussion about total scope of work. So obviously they mean total scope of work means activities. That's one of 6 PMI definitions for the word scope. So obviously these activities become very important. That's the work we're going to have to do to create whatever we told the customer we're going to give them. And this is what a work breakdown structure looks like. We have the name of the project. We have a list of all the deliverables. Obviously, those should be already known to us based on a signed off charter. Again, as I mentioned, they may not be fully understood, but we should definitely have our arms around them at some level. And by the way, if we can't get them fully understood, or we even can't get them understood to a degree that we're comfortable, then we shouldn't be moving the project into planning. We should be throwing up a red flag and saying, hey, wait a minute. We can't go into planning right now. We absolutely don't have enough information about these deliverables, or we should go into what I call an R&D mode, which is obviously slow down, be more cautious, and take baby steps as we move forward with these deliverables, because we have so much uncertainty around their description and their agreed upon requirements. So what we do next is, obviously we should have people assigned to these deliverables. Hopefully those people are subject matter experts with the deliverables, and their job in developing the work breakdown structure is to sit down either by themselves or with a group of people that can help them and simply identify the activities to get the deliverables done. And as you can see in the slide, I typically do that with Post-it notes in what I call a work breakdown structure meeting. And we end up identifying the activities necessary to create each of those deliverables. So to put this in a more practical example for a minute, let's assume we're putting a company picnic together. That's our project, right? And the deliverables are, we've got to get a site, food, publicity, we've got to have games, and we want to put out a pre-picnic survey. So my charter would indicate all that. I'd have all those deliverables assigned to individuals, and we get together for the work breakdown structure meeting, and those individuals start to identify the activities necessary. And I'm just going to use the site as the example. The site person says, well, we need to rent tents, we need to recruit some cleanup crews, we need to select a site, we need to go visit some sites, and we need to prepare a site checklist. Now, it's not important at this point that these activities be in sequence. It's just important that they be lined up underneath the site. And as you can tell from looking at them, they're not really in a logical sequence. So the food people would do the same, publicity, games, entertainment, pre-picnic survey people would all do the same, right? Then the next step is for the person that owns the site to take those activities and put them in a sequence. Just a simple logical sequence. What would be the logical order we would do these activities? And I think here it would be prepare a site checklist, because I'm going to use that when I go out to visit the sites, and my next activity would be go visit the sites. Select a site, recruit cleanup crews, and I think I'm going to go ahead and add that I'll rent tents after I've selected a site, because maybe one of the sites has enough shelter that I may not have to rent tents. So I'll just wait and do that in a sequence after I've selected the site. So what you're looking at in front of you is called a network diagram. I commonly refer to as an activity network diagram, because it's obviously a network diagram of the activities. So our next step after the work breakdown structure, creating that, would be to sit down and put those activities into some sequence. And there can often be a lot of debate. That's why I usually have my project team member be the referee for settling the debate if people think the sequence needs to be different or should be different. But generally, logic is what takes over here and controls the sequence of the activities. The next step is to take those activities and start adding detail to them. So for instance, down in this picture, I have what's called a work plan. Work plan isn't kind of a common name. There doesn't appear to be in project management a common name for this. PMI uses sometimes work breakdown structure dictionary, but I've actually never heard anybody use that in the field in 40 some years that I've been around projects. The common term I've heard a lot is a work plan. So a work plan is put together by the person that owns the deliverable. In this case, it's a guy named Bill Wright, and he's been given it a budgeted amount of money based on the overall budget of the project for the site, and his budget is $2,134, and he's obviously already sequenced the activities, as you can see here. The WBS number on the right is just an identifier number that comes off the work breakdown structure. And now you can see that he's assigned resources to the activities, and hopefully in discussing with the resource, they've come up with a duration. So Jim has volunteered, or maybe voluntold, to do the prepare site checklist, and Jim's going to need 5 days to get that done. And the team is going to go out and visit the sites, and they need 10 days to go visit the sites. And over on the right, you'll see there's a predecessor, because obviously they can't visit sites until you prepare the site checklist. I'm not going to get into cost with you today. Obviously, the effort column would be where you put the cost of labor, and if there's any materials being bought or any vendors being contracted with to do any of this work, we put those, and then obviously compare that number to the $2,134 budget that's been given. The site, obviously the big part of that cost is going to be whatever we we pay to rent the site. So our first step is create the work breakdown structure. That's a tool. Our next step is to sequence the activities under each deliverable in a logical order and put that on a work plan, and then obviously build the detail into the work plan as to who's doing the activity, how much is it going to cost, how long is it going to take. And of course, at this point, we can start to look at budget concerns, because if our numbers are adding up differently than what we predicted the project was going to cost, we can start dealing with that. Since I'm not going to get into budget today, that's about all I'm going to say about that. We'll start addressing it more from a time standpoint. So let's define what an activity network diagram is. It's simply a diagram showing the logical sequences among all the project activities. Again, PMI normally refers to this as just a network diagram, but since it's a network diagram of the activities, I like the word activity in front of it. Obviously, it's a very visual document, as you can tell from the one you saw on the site. And people can start having discussions about, have we missed any activities, or do we have enough resources to do all these activities? And obviously a very visual tool. Obviously, at this point, we're going to need to look at project management software, because if you're building a schedule, you certainly would want to build it on software so that you can use the software to track the project when it's underway. We could have literally a whole half-day session about project management software. I'm just going to share with you a product that I fell in love with about 4 years ago called WBS Schedule Pro. It's out of a small little company out of Austin, Texas. It costs roughly around $300 compared to obviously Microsoft Project, which is the gold standard, which is probably a $1,200 or $1,500 product. I found Critical Tools, WBS Schedule Pro gives me everything I need for a very short or very small amount of money, and it's also very easy to use. And I also want to say, obviously, I have no financial interest in this company. It's just a great product. And are there other great products out there? Maybe, but when I find one at $300 that does everything I want it to do, and that I can show people how to use it in about 45 minutes, which, by the way, I would never be able to do with Microsoft Project, I don't tend to look anymore. I mean, this has been a product that's really served me well. So what I want the software to do is type in it. Obviously, I need to type in activities and sequences, but once I do that, I want the project software to kind of take over at that point. Build and track the schedule. Obviously, I want it to build and track the budget as well. Calculate and track what we call a critical path. I also like it to track multiple projects. I want it to also track against a baseline, so I can start to see some variances when the project gets into the execution control phase. So sorry, but I just felt like, since we were talking about schedules, you can't talk about schedules and not talk about using project software. And I hope I don't disappoint anybody, but Microsoft Excel is not a project management software. So if you're using it to build your schedules, quit. All right, so the next step is I've got to take all these small activity network diagrams that we've built for each of the individual deliverables and combine them together into an overall project schedule. We're going to have two choices there. We can either use an activity network diagram, or we can go to what we call a Gantt chart. Obviously, since I've already started out identifying my activities on Post-it notes, and we've already started out creating activity network diagrams to do the sequence at the deliverable level, it just makes sense to me to continue to use my Post-it notes. And the first schedule format that I'll use is the activity network diagram format. So that's what you're looking at right here at the project level. And obviously in this picture, we've got 4 different deliverables, because you see 4 different colored Post-it notes. And yes, that is a best practice that I use in my projects. When we're creating the work breakdown structure, each deliverable will have a different colored Post-it note for their activities. And that kind of gives us a visual, unless you have color blindness problems. Now, the orange dots that you see in this picture, you'll notice that every activity that has an orange dot has a blue arrow going into it. Or another way to say that is a connection with an activity in another deliverable. So if you look at the very last activity with the orange dot on it to your right, you'll see that the blue arrow It has a black arrow coming from the other activity, but that activity and black arrow we already identified. But now when we put everything together, we see that it also has a relationship with that, I guess it's a tan colored activity. So the orange dot would have told us, I need to draw that arrow from the tan activity up to the green activity. And by the way, any software you buy isn't going to tell you that dependency exists, because they don't make like a company picnic project software. So you've got to do that. That's what you're doing with your team in the planning sessions, is identify where not only the black arrows go, obviously inside your deliverable, but where do the blue arrow, and I'm just using blue here as a visual, where do the blue arrows go, meaning the connections within the deliverables or among the deliverables. And obviously to build the final project schedule, we've got to identify where those are. Also notice with the tan post-it note, there's 2 orange dots. Why? Because there's 2 blue arrows coming from 2 different deliverables, the yellow deliverable and the purple or lilac deliverable. So that team would have identified 2 activities that need to get done before their activity could start. And so they put the orange dots up there. And inside those orange dots, by the way, would be the WBS number, so that we can directly connect to the yellow activity and the purple activity. Here's an example of one, because I always get accused of, do I really use Post-it notes for this in real life? This is a project I worked on a couple years ago, and you can see it's very visual. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different deliverables in this pre-inspection phase 1 of the project. You can clearly see that the orange deliverable has the most work associated with it. You can also very clearly see that there's not a lot of intermingling of the activities in this phase. Pretty much deliverables have to get done before other deliverables can get started. So again, a very visual document. I can always take this at home in the evening and put it into project management software. If we choose to put this in Microsoft Project or WBS Schedule Pro, it's really just a matter of taking this information that you see in front of you in this picture and typing it into the software. This is a activity network diagram for the company picnic, created on, by the way, WBS Schedule Pro. Now, with one little caveat, the picture you're seeing right here, I actually created on Visio. Microsoft Visio is not a project software, but in order for you to see the boxes a little bit clearer, I needed to do this and hand draw the boxes and hand draw the arrows. I'll show you what this looks like on software, and it's much harder to read on project software. But so to be honest with you, this is on Visio. So if you look really closely, you'll see our 5 yellow activities: the prepare site checklist, visit sites, select site, rent tents, and recruit cleanup crews. But now you also see all the activities associated with all the other deliverables. The food deliverables are green. I think the light blue on the left is our pre-picnic survey. Publicity has kind of the orange colored post-it notes or boxes, and then our gray boxes all are the gains entertainment activities. You'll notice that all the activities on the pre-picnic survey on the left have start and finish dates. Why? Because they're done. That would be a phase 1 part of the project, so we obviously wouldn't be working on phase 2 until we saw the results of the survey. You'll notice that all the activities in phase 2 are site activities, the games activities, the food activities, don't have start finish dates on them yet. Why? Because I don't need to put start finish dates on them at this point. What I need to do is find out where the sequences are and lay out the sequences. Once those sequences are laid out, then we'll come back to the person that's doing the activity and start our start finish dates. And of course, we're going to do this from left to right. So we'll start with Jim, who's doing the prepare site checklist, and Sally, who's planning the menu. And assuming we got done with phase 2 planning on May 23rd, we'll get those people in the room and start identifying start dates. And then of course, whatever Jim's start date is, 5 days later, assuming or based on his availability, will be the finish date. And we'll just continue to move left to right and populate all the activities with start finish dates. So I actually have a name for that. I call that my start finish date meeting. The resources that are actually doing the activities are invited to that meeting. Non-working days or hours are established. So if we're not going to work weekends and we're not going to work holidays, some of you may be working in shifts, and you can factor in that people are available 1 or 2 or 3 shifts. And then start finish dates are determined based on the sequence of the activities from left to right. So my best practice when I'm building schedules is that start finish dates are the last bits of information that I add to the schedule. And I make sure that those start finish dates are coming from the actual resource that's doing the activity. One of the problems that happens when you build schedules backward is you cannot ask the resource for their start finish date. You end up having to tell them what the start finish date is. Why? Because you're trying to force fit a project schedule. And I find that has a very negative effect on team morale. When people that have no idea how busy they are or how long it takes to do something is dictating to them exactly how long it takes to do it. By the way, that's another minor or major issue with building schedules backward. And it's also going to not provide you with any of the buy-in that you kind of need to have from the people that are working on the project. So here's that picture blown up a little bit more detail. I'm just going to look at the site, and you can see that we now have start finish dates on all the activities. And if you look out to the right at a plan award ceremony that has a finish date of 7/11, obviously that's the last date for getting all the work done that we need to have a picnic. So hopefully the picnic's on a date after 7/11. If it happens to be on a date like, hey, we knew the project or the picnic had to be done by the end of May, well, then we know we're 11 days over the end of May, and we're going to need to compress this schedule. If somebody doesn't approve the request to have the picnic moved out to about the middle of June, or I'm sorry, middle of July. The other option for putting a schedule together in terms of showing it is what we call a Gantt chart format. So Gantt chart is a calendar-based bar chart display of the project's activities that shows sequences, durations, and start finish dates. So it shows exactly the same information that you find on an activity network diagram. It simply is in a different format. It was developed by a guy named Henry Gantt all the way back in 1912, 1914. So I always like to mention that because there's not a whole lot of things we use today that were developed that far back. But actually, project management as a discipline wasn't really developed until the late 1950s, and the Navy wanted to honor Henry Gantt, who had come up with a format for building schedules, and so they put the label of Gantt chart. So this is what a Gantt chart looks like. This is actually the company picnic again. You can see the format is quite different. There's a calendar across the top. All of our activities are listed down the left-hand side, and the durations and the start finish dates are there. But now the boxes have been converted into bars. Obviously, the length of the bar is the duration of the activity. Certainly a much more visual document. And any good project software, once you have the activity network diagram in that software, you literally will push a button and it will provide the Gantt chart. If you update one, it will update the other automatically, a huge advantage of project software. You might notice here on this one, I've grayed out the weekends. They're non-working days, so the software will gray those out. There happens to be 2 holidays. Whatever year this was, July 4th fell on a Monday, and May 30th, Memorial Day, fell on a Monday. So you'll notice those 2 weekends, 3 days are grayed out because we agreed not to work on holidays. Again, this one is on Microsoft Project that you're looking at, but WBS Schedule Pro will give you a very similar picture. So the end result of our schedule is either an activity network diagram or a Gantt chart built left to right, obviously showing a finish date. And at that point, we would approach customers and obviously compare that to the date that people were expecting the project to be done. Obviously, if this picnic is expected to be done by the end of July, our schedule is indicating that shouldn't be a problem. We should be able to get this picnic or hold this picnic before the end of July. On the other hand, if people were expecting the picnic to be held before the end of June, we've got some work to do. We're going to have to compress this schedule. And the good news is if we build a good schedule, we can hopefully make some really good decisions about how to compress it. So in wrapping things up, I wanted to talk a little bit about 4 elements of a successful project. One is a well-crafted and agreed upon project charter that occurs during the initiation phase. Obviously, that's a very important document because our work breakdown structure can only really be as good as how good our project charter is. So our ability to define activities and build budgets and build schedules really depends on how well crafted and agreed upon our project charter is. I believe a second element of a successful project is that we have a team-built work breakdown structure. So we've had team involvement in building that document. Why? To make sure we've got as many activities identified as we possibly can before we build our final budget, obviously, and our final schedule. 3, the third element I believe is a realistic team-built project schedule, where the team has been involved in building it. We've built it from left to right. We've been realistic with the durations. We've been realistic with the start-finish dates, and frankly, realistic with the availability of people to do the work. And the fourth element is our ability to accurately track variances during the project, which again is a great benefit of using project software, is the project software can create a baseline based on your plan, and you can track actual against that baseline when the project's underway, and obviously see any variances that you're seeing that you need to start addressing, like work that's not getting done within the durations that you, or within the start finish dates that you established during planning. So Patrick, that's going to wrap me up. I wanted to make a quick note. If you're interested in the book that I wrote back in 2016, it's not a long book. It's about 60 pages long, called Pursuing Project Excellence. It's available on Amazon. There's the QR code that will take you there. I also want you to know, I believe the book on Amazon is a $10 book. I wanted you to know that the proceeds from that book go to 2 places. One is a great place in Middletown, Ohio called Hope House. Hope is a mission for people that are kind of down and out at the time, and Hope does a great job of helping those people get back on their feet and get back in the workplace. And then the second place that proceeds go to is our Butler County Humane Society, which has a great dog and cat shelter and is always looking for money to buy dog food. So between Hope House and Butler County, which is where I live, I'm down in Cincinnati, Ohio, just north of Cincinnati. Cincinnati is Hamilton County, and I'm in an area just to the north. So, you know, the book is available and the proceeds go to the 2 great places. I kind of decided a long time ago I'm not going to be able to retire on a $10 book, so might as well give the money to people that are putting it to good use. So I think what we want to do, Patrick, is open up for some questions and see what you guys have to say about what I shared with you this morning.
Sure. We did have some come in. Let's see. You have touched on some of these, so you might have to circle back a little bit.
Okay,
but,
no problem.
First one, what are the 3 questions a project manager should ask to the sponsors or steering committee to determine a good launch date? Did you get all that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. 3 questions a project manager should ask to sponsors or steering committees. So first of all, let's talk about real quick. The hierarchy in a project management is typically there's a sponsor, there's a project manager, and then there's a project team. And the project sponsor usually should be a high-level person because of the authority factor. And sometimes that's done by a steering committee. I will tell you, I'm typically not a big fan of a committee being a sponsor. I kind of like one person, because in a committee you end up, if you have to go to them to get decisions, it ends up takes much longer to get decisions from a committee typically than it does one person. But I've been in situations where I've had committees and school boards and people like that at that what I call sponsorship level. So obviously the sponsor has a major responsibility in the project. And launch dates and finish dates are typically imposed a lot of times by sponsors. So, I thought the question would be more around a finish date than a launch date. Because if you stop and think about it for a minute, you really can't launch a project until the plan is signed off. So, you've got to get a charter approved. You can't actually start building a plan until the charter gets approved. Then you got to build a plan. Depending on the scope of the project, you could get a plan built maybe in a day or two, or I've been in projects where it took us 4 or 5 months to build the project plan, and we really can't launch the project until that plan gets approved. So the launch date is really going to kind of be dependent on when we get the project plan signed off. So I think the question more around the sponsor would be, if we're working against an unreasonable due date, then I need to accelerate planning so that we can accelerate the launch date. Because clearly, if I'm taking my time in planning, or there's delays in planning, that's what's going to have the biggest impact on a launch date. And of course, as you just saw, if we build the schedule left to right, the launch date is what's going to determine the finish date. So most of the time, I find sponsors are really more interested in when are you going to get the project done versus when are you going to get it launched. But because the two are connected, I mean, obviously, if I feel like we have an unreasonable due date, I'm going to work with the sponsor to free up resources. So that would be one of the questions. What are you going to do to help me free up people? Because I need those people freed up so that we can accelerate planning. And most likely, I'm going to need those people freed up so that I can compress the schedule. Let's give you a quick example. Let's say that one of the activities in our project, a guy named Joe is doing that activity, and he's told me that he can get that project done in 12 hours, but because he's so busy, it's going to take him 4 days to get that 12 hours of work done. So the duration on my project is 4 days, but the work that's actually truly involved in that 4 days is really only 12 hours of labor. So obviously, if I need to compress the schedule, I need to go to the sponsor and say, hey, can you give me Joe full time? Because if I can get him full time, I can take 4 days down to 2 days, right? If you only got 12 hours worth of work to do, I can get it done in 2 days and compress the schedule by 2, but I've got to be able to have him full time. I can't have him part time. Obviously, if he's 12 hours in 4 days, I don't have him full time. I have him part time. So that's a big question that you want to ask sponsors, especially when you're trying to compress schedules, is can I get resources fully committed to do the work of the project and get work done within reasonable timeframes? The other question I think you've got to ask the sponsor is, what are you willing to give up from a quality standpoint? Because we may not be able to compress the schedule by spending money alone. We may have to go back and look at things that we agreed to on the project charter and make a confession, for the sake of a better word, that we're not going to be able to meet these requirements given the fact that we have to compress the schedule. So I think it would be around resource availability. What sacrifices are they willing to make around quality, which is usually a big focus of the sponsor, since at the end we have a customer that's going to determine if the project's good or not by the quality of the deliverables that we provide them. And I think maybe the third question would be around risk, because anytime we have to compress a schedule or deal with unreasonable launch dates or unreasonable finish dates, we're going to be taking on additional risk in the project. And that's usually one of the responsibilities of a sponsor or a steering committee, is around what level of risk are we willing to take? Yeah, great question.
Okay, I think we really only have time for one more. What are some time management strategies that can be used when activities miss completion dates?
Yeah. Well, that's where you start using double secret probation, Patrick. No. Well, first of all, and we're seeing this especially today, is activities missing completion dates. I'm a huge fan of being proactive in a project. So I want to be tracking activities, especially activities that are critical to the project. And I know we didn't get into the concept of critical path today because of the time involved, but I'm going to be tracking those because the bottom line for me is I don't like surprises that something didn't complete on time. Now, there's going to be some of those surprises. They're part of project management. But what I want to do is track those, and during progress meetings with my project team, ask a very simple question. Do you have any sense that you're not going to be able to complete this on time at this point? Or to the due date that we committed on the project schedule, right? And if you're waiting until the very last minute to tell me that, which by the way may be reasonable sometimes, I don't like that. You know, if you're seeing things a third of the way into that activity that are telling you we're not going to meet that completion date, finish date, let me know, because then I can be more proactive in dealing with it. Maybe finding resources that can help you, or ways that we can get done on time, or other times just realize, hey, we're not going to get done on time. Obviously, if it's not an activity that's on the critical path, we may be able to use float to keep the project on schedule. Obviously, if it's an activity on the critical path of the project, we've got serious considerations downstream that we have to consider. So my number one goal there, strategy wise, is to be proactive. You know, don't be surprised by this. You know, if your team members gave you the durations, if your team members gave you, if the people doing the activity gave you the durations, if the people doing the activities gave you the start finish dates, they should be accountable for that information that they gave you. And your job is to just hold them accountable for it. And the best way to do that is to be proactive. I can't eliminate all surprises though. I've tried, it's impossible.
Okay,
Great question.
Well, that does conclude our time together. So we would like to thank you for attending and encourage you to register for Bob's next program, which is Essential Skills for Managing Projects, which will be delivered in person in Independence on September 20th and 21st, 2022. And then also we will be doing the virtual version on Mondays and Tuesdays, October 17th, 18th, 24th, and 25th. That is 4 half-day sessions, which will be delivered live via Zoom. You can register at the website you see up the screen. You can also contact us to learn more about this program and all our other programs by calling us at 330-672-3416, or you can email us at yourtrainingpartner@kent.edu. We can bring all of our programs to your organization, either virtually or in person, and tailor them to fit your needs. You can join our extensive list of clients and bring Kent State to your organization. We will be taking a break from the webinars for the summer, but we will be scheduling more webinars for the fall of 2022, and the webinar schedule will be posted soon. You can keep up to date on the new webinar schedule at the website you see on the screen. For those attending live, you will be asked to complete a short survey. Please complete the survey so that we can be assured that we are bringing you the most usable and relevant content possible. You will also receive a follow-up email with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development and our presenter, Bob Jewell, thank you for attending today and have a great weekend.
Thanks everyone. Appreciate your time today.